there are a lot of problems with the New York State system that we were seeking to address through the lawsuit. So in general, the big problem was the overuse of solitary confinement for all people confined within the state correctional system. It's extreme in terms of its deprivation, it's extreme in terms of its length. So there was that problem, and then there was the problem that particular groups of prisoners we thought were, shouldn't be subjected to solitary confinement as punishment. That included juveniles, that included pregnant women, that included people with developmental disabilities. So there was both a general problem of overuse of SHU within the system and then a problem about particular categories of prisoners. From a legal perspective, our argument was grounded in Eighth Amendment theory, Eighth Amendment jurisprudence, and also an argument about due process. And the Eighth Amendment argument was essentially that a lot of the offenses for which people were being put in SHU didn't deserve SHU confinement, or the amount of SHU time, the amount of solitary time that individuals were getting was far exceeded the risk to the system that was posed by their misconduct. So I'll give you an example for two of our clients. Two of our clients were sentenced to SHU for lengthy periods of time, months, for having, many months, for having in their cells legal papers, papers that they could use to file liens against people in state court in New York. The only risk that they were posed was that they would go and file them in court and cause difficulty for people who now would have a lien on their home or something like that. Now, I don't want to trivialize that difficulty, but from our perspective, when you're talking about putting someone in isolation, where a lot of the evidence suggests that after only 15 days, there's a huge risk of negative consequences. For that kind of behavior, talking about putting people in isolation for months and months and months and sometimes years, it just didn't stand up from our perspective to what the Eighth Amendment requires. The Eighth Amendment requires some kind of connection, some kind of proportionality between the punishment you're receiving and what you did. So what the settlement puts in place is, the first thing is it takes certain categories of prisoners, just sort of basically presumptively out of the box. And that's juveniles, that's pregnant women, and that's generally people with developmental disabilities. The second thing that the settlement does is for all prisoners, not just for these categories of prisoners, it has now imposed guidelines, really for the first time, on what hearing officers can do in terms of the use of solitary. For a particular infraction, hearing officers will be given specific guidance as to how high their sentences can go. And that's really quite significant. That hopefully will reduce a lot of the arbitrariness and also hopefully reduce some of the excessive sentences.